And we're back with another outstanding episode of Square Table Degenerates podcast. Today we are joined by English singer-songwriter Mr. Jamie Lonsdale. How are you today, sir?
Very well, Joe. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show.
Heck yeah, man. I've gotten a couple emails from your company for a while back, and I decided it was a good fit, man. Thanks for coming up, man. I really do appreciate it, man. I really do.
Well, it's a very exciting moment because this week I've launched a new song called Mermaid, which I wrote about this time last year, walking along a beautiful beach. And I thought, well, I'm going to release it for Valentine's Day because I know Valentine's Day means an incredible amount to so many people.
Heck yeah, man. So it says in your bio you were born in Oxford. Is that right?
I was actually born in London. My parents started the World Record Club in the 1950s. And so they spent all their time in the recording studios. And in the heart of London is Bond Street. And my mother would make her recordings in the Chapel recording studios. And she had the orchestra there. And as you know, to take a studio and have an orchestra is an expensive business. And she was 9 months pregnant. And she had been told by the doctor not to go ahead, but she wanted to finish it. And so I was almost born in the recording studio. Luckily, it was a short hop in a black London cab, the short distance to the Harley Street Clinic. And her waters broke in the taxi. So that was, I think I had a very musical introduction to life.
You were kind of born in an instrument almost. That's great. Best luck. You were just like hatched in a tuba or something. That's awesome. Now, now did you guys move to Oxford when you were littler, or what point did you leave London? What was your, first couple?
Well, we were brought up in Chelsea Square in the middle of Chelsea. And my parents were so busy making their recordings. They recorded, my mother produced over 60 shows, and she put Shakespeare plays to music. She had Sir Laurence Olivier reading the famous stories of the Bible, which she put to music. And she also had the music rights to Beatrix Potter. So all those wonderful Beatrix Potter stories, she put on coloured 45s, the vinyls. And America had them, but England did not. So she was the first to use coloured vinyl. And in practically every nursery, in every home in England, I don't know about America, but I think it went global, was Peter Rabbit. And all the Beatrix Potter, and it was all dramatized very, very well. She had very famous actors reading and singing the lyrics. So that was my upbringing.
All right, now did you guys travel a lot when you were little? I mean, your mom was, your family was in the orchestra and the music business and all that. Did you get to see a lot of stuff when you were little, or were you kind of like at home with, brother, sister? What was your life like when you were like little?
Well, for me, because my parents were workaholics, my grandmother, who'd only had one child, my grandmother felt that she wanted to have, half a dozen children, and she only had my father. So when we were born, she stepped into the breach with my mother working sometimes till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. My grandmother very much brought us up, and she tried to steer me away by telling me that I had to join the army, and I rebelled, but it wasn't that much of a rebellion because I ended up feeling that I had to serve, and I joined the Royal Navy, which I did for 5 years. So that was my grandmother's influence, and it took me, I think really, I was 38 years old before I realized, that musical gene in me, I couldn't keep down.
Okay. Now, tell the house you were born and grew up in. It said something about the house was famous. I'm not really too much familiar with English architecture and all that. Now, tell me about this house. Well, maybe it wasn't the one you were born in, but the one you were grown up in. It said in the bio here. What was this house built, and why is it famous? Like, what's the history behind this this house you got?
Well, it's probably, arguably, it's, estate agents would always say to me, Jamie, this is the most beautiful house in England, because not only was it beautiful, but it wasn't so big that it became unlivable. It was a very good size. It was 14 bedrooms. It was built in 1677.
Jeez.
And it replaced a castle which burnt down in 1620. And it was in a beautiful park called Kingston Lisle Park. And that was laid out in the 13th century by Alistair Lisle. And in those days, you could only empark land with royal permission. And so it took an act of parliament to empark Kingston Lisle. And that 200 acres of parkland is still pretty well exactly as it was in the 13th century.
Oh, nice. So the house, is the house still in your family now, or what? Who has the house?
No. I sold it and moved to London. It had, my grandparents had bought it in the Second World War, and we had really enjoyed it. But all these big old houses, they're expensive beasts to run. And I served my 30 years of running it, and I loved it. I brought my children up there, and we had an absolute great time. But we knew it wouldn't last forever.
That's people don't realize about them big houses. There was a bunch of I'm in Cleveland here in the States, in Ohio, and there was back in the 1900s, early 1800s, you're talking 1905, the robber baron era. There was a whole bunch of they called it Millionaires Row, because people like Rockefeller and all that would build $1 million houses, but you couldn't take care of them after fact, because you require a staff of 30 people. I'm not saying your house required 30 people, but some of these estates, had 50 bedrooms, 30 people staff. It's you can't afford that for a kid. No kid wants to do all that. So you got to kind of have to, after a while, figure out what you're going to do. A lot of them, actually, interesting fact here in the States, they had in their contract, once their house was done, they just said, tear it down. Nobody else is going to be able to take care of this. That's how much money they had to waste back then. It was crazy.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, families that are fortunate enough to be able to live like that, invariably, it's not quite the same if you're born into the third or fourth generation. You're left with the asset but no cash.
Right. Everything kind of lusters off, and you're like, okay, I'm broken. I got this big house. What the hell am I going to do with this?
Absolutely.
Heck yeah, man. So what age did you first, when you were really little, first start singing and getting into choir, that you remember?
Well, yes, I do. I love singing as a little boy, and my friends took me to Peter Pan, the pantomime, and they said, would any child like to help us sing this next song? And I remember standing up and waving my hand, and unfortunately they chose somebody else, but it made me realize, actually, that's what I want to do. That's who I am. And I then told my vicar in my church at home in Kingston Lisle in Oxfordshire, please, can I sing a solo? And there were only 4 or 5 people in this 12th century church every Sunday. Now, unfortunately, the next Sunday, it was the Christmas carol service. So everyone in the village, all 90 people turned up, and I knew them all. And he suddenly said, now Jamie's going to come up and sing a solo, unaccompanied. And as I went up and I faced the congregation, and I was about to sing, and my older sister, who is 1 year older, and of course, when you're 6, that makes a big difference.
Oh,
and she put a finger in each ear and lifted her arms, her elbows right up, and she was in the front pew of the church. I lost any confidence that I might have had, and I ran back without singing and hid in my mother's coat for 32 years. So it took me until I was 38. And I think my message to everybody, your listeners included, is actually, if you have a passion, it's never too late to follow it. And whether or not you make success of it, actually it doesn't matter. It's really enabling yourself to follow your passion, and whether you make a success of it really depends on how much you want it. I think there are a lot of people with fabulous voices, but they don't really want it.
No. A lot of people just don't have a lot of people are shy too. Let's be real. A lot of people got great voices. They can sing whatever, but like you said, when you were little, I mean, obviously you were just a kid then, but you put anybody up in front of a crowd, they just sit there like, they freak out. I mean, I started out in stand up, and I mean, I'll probably get back into it eventually, but like, you get some people up there, they're funny as hell. Like they're talking like this. Me and you are talking. They're just some of the funniest people out there. Second you put up in front of a crowd, they freeze, forget everything. It's all about having that presence, man. It really is.
Absolutely. Well, if you're doing stand-up comedy, I mean, I think that's the bravest thing in the world. It's a real skill, isn't it?
Dude, it's so people don't realize, like, standing in front of a crowd and you're basically telling the crowd that you're better than them and you're gonna make them laugh. That's it's kind of the hardest form of entertainment because there's no musical accompaniment, there's no script. It's just you and a microphone, and you got to make them people laugh. And if you don't laugh, they're going to come at you like Roman gladiators wanting blood. They are a ruthless bunch, brother. They will not stop.
I've been to a few of those shows where luckily I've sat in the audience. But, they've taken no prisoners. If they're not amused, they say so. And they let you know. I'm very glad that generally people don't do that with singers.
Oh, yeah. Most of the singers, well, usually if you're coming to see a singer, most of the people kind of maybe already know the music a little bit. So you're expecting it, and it's a little bit different than the stand-up for sure. Well, you can always go back to the music, too. The music is the beauty of the song. If you got a great song, you can sing, kind of whatever lyrics almost, as long as you got the good beat, to an extent almost.
Absolutely. Well, what I find very interesting is some people listen and hear the melody. And there are others, when they hear a song, they're listening, really almost purely to the lyrics. I know this because I hear the melody. I don't necessarily, focus on the lyrics. And what I've tried to do with my own songwriting is write better lyrics with each song. And, initially when I started, the lyrics came at the same time as the melody. I'd be crossing the road or in the back of a taxi. It was always at very inconvenient moments. And, but now I really try and improve those lyrics. The melody comes very naturally. And in fact, on Valentine's morning, my girlfriend was telling me that I hadn't written her a song, and I woke up and I thought, well, I could go out and buy some flowers, but actually I think she'd be a bit more touched if I wrote her a song. And 25 minutes later, I'd actually finished the song.
Nice.
So I look forward to releasing that for next Valentine's Day. It's called Paris.
Oh, nice. You got a little tease there. Next Valentine's Day, the Paris song's coming out. All right, we got a question from Shar. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but she says, Shar Avery, she says, what made you sing and write songs? It's kind of a general question, but what, we kind of touched on it earlier, but what was your, main, was it basically just, you growing up around the music? Was your parents the inspiration? Is that what?
Well, Charlotte, let me tell you that I had this complete freezing moment when I was 6, and I still always loved to sing, but I liked to sing with other people. So I was in the choir all through school, and I was head of choir. And then luckily I had the best choral conductor in England. His name is Ralph Allwood. And he said, Jamie, it's a Christmas service today. We want you to sing the first verse of Once in Royal David City. And I said, Ralph, I'm terribly sorry. I will never sing a solo. I just can't do it. I'm very happy being your head of choir. And luckily he understood. So it wasn't until I was 38 that my neighbor was giving singing lessons, and she agreed to teach me. And her contract said that all her pupils had to sing solos in the monthly concerts around Oxfordshire. So with absolute terror, I faced the audience, and I can remember how my knees were knocking together as I faced not a large audience, but probably 50 people. I was absolutely terrified. And by the third month, I came off stage and I suddenly realized, my God, I'm starting to really enjoy this. And so it is. And for years now, the best part of my life for me is actually being on stage performing and taking an audience on a journey. I see people coming into the theatre, and they come with the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're stressed. And so I like to make them forget all of that that's outside the theatre. And I like to take them on a journey of some happy songs, some funny songs, but particularly some moving, sad songs. Because I think it's been proven that if you go through a sad song and you cry, it is actually a route to happiness. And by the interval, particularly maybe with the help of a drink, people are leaving the theatre, I'm told, and I can see it in their faces, really without a care in the world, happy, smiley, laughing, wanting to come to the next show. And that is what I find very encouraging. But the best feedback I ever get is when I see people crying. And because you can't fake that.
Right.
People will come up and say they enjoyed it, blah, de, blah, de, blah. And, I hope they mean it, but you never know how genuine it is. But when you actually see 2 or 3 people, and particularly grown men, I remember once 70-year-old man in the front row crying his eyes out. Oh. And up to that point, I thought the song that I had written wasn't touching people, but actually, yes, it was. So thanks, Charlotte, for bringing up that question.
Again, now what did you, from the time you were 6 and you froze and hinted your mom's petticoat until you went to high school, like, what would you, were you like into sports? What did you do to kill time all day?
Well, my father was a fanatical tennis player. So he wanted us to get to the centre court at Wimbledon. And so my 2 sisters and I were trained practically every other day during the summer holidays with tennis lessons. And it was like boot camp. And so it was tennis. And my father played every day of his life. We had Margaret Court come and stay for Wimbledon in London. And she won Wimbledon several years running, of course. Right. She was I think she won more open tennis competitions around the world than still anyone today. And so she was a great inspiration. I have to say I was never that good, but I enjoy it. And people recognize that I have a very competitive side to me that comes out on the tennis court.
Yeah, do you have any favorite tennis players when you were coming? Like, when what era are we talking? Because I kind of liked, I actually really dug tennis back in the 80s when it was McEnroe versus Connors and Martina Navratilova versus Chris Everett. There was some great battles back then. Did you have any tennis guys you like coming up, or is kind of like whoever?
Well, my 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 father was lucky enough to be made, because he had done so much for British tennis. He was made a member of the All England Club at Wimbledon, and the privilege of that is that he got a free seat every day in the members box, and he also had 2 free tickets for guests. So my sister and I would go there, and on one occasion we were sitting there, and Cliff Richard, the very wonderful singer who has sung through so many decades now, he was sitting behind us, and rain had stopped play practically the whole week, and the 20,000 people were there very bored because there was no tennis to watch. It was before they built the roof that slides over. And so somebody passed him up the umpire's microphone, and he stood on his seat. And this, I mean, the man has great faith. And it was such a brave thing to do, was to pick up 20,000 people just with, and he clicked his fingers, congratulations. And the whole 20,000 people started joining in, and he transformed the mood. That was awesome. Absolutely wonderful.
That's awesome. Now, did you know where you're going to go to college, or did you just like pick a bunch of colleges? What made you decide, and where did you go to college?
Well, it was being told by my grandmother that I had to join the very traditional regiment of the Grenadiers, and my way of rebelling was to say, no, I won't join the army, I'll join the Navy. And at 13, I joined Pangbourne College, which was a nautical college. So we were in naval uniform from 13. We would spend holidays on board warships, and it was all very exciting. So it was a sort of rather natural progression. I don't think we actually had careers talks by anyone else but the Army and the Navy. And so when the commander came and said, Lonsdale, will you sign here? It seemed a very easy thing to do. So I signed up for what was then 8 years, but I had the option to come out after 5. Very lucky, I was chosen to be the Royal Barge officer on board the Royal Yacht Britannia. And so we sailed all around the world, taking the royal family from island to island, particularly in the South Pacific.
You actually touched on this. You already talked about why you joined the Navy. He was kind of rebelling against the Army. Now, the barge officer. Now, describe the duties of a barge officer to those of us non-Navy types. I was Air Force. I know some Navy stuff because I with work and all that. But describe what a barge officer does.
Well, it was a slight unique opportunity to join the Royal Yacht, which had 21 officers on board and 250 yachtsmen. All the yachtsmen were there as volunteers, and they were only promoted. It was, if you understand the English saying, is dead man's shoes. So people had to retire from the Navy before there was a promotion. So you ended up with actually quite mature leading seamen who really should have been chief petty officers by then. So everybody was thoroughly overqualified for the job, but they loved their work. And as an officer, you never had to really check on anything. It all happened in a sort of keen, professional manner. And my job was, there were 3 junior officers, of which I was the most junior, and the 3 of us took it in turns to drive the Royal Yacht around the world. The navigating officer would set the line on the chart, and our job was to to try and stick to that line and make sure that we avoided all shipping in the process. Of course, once we were at anchor, it was then my job to take this royal barge, which is it's available to see in Edinburgh at Leith Docks, and now it's become Scotland's major tourist attraction.
Nice.
It's well maintained. It's beautiful to go round, and my job was the timely and safe arrival of the royal party to get them ashore to their destination, and that was a great experience.
What sweet ports did you get? You'd say you traveled, obviously, with the Navy, they get to go all over the place. What any cool ports you get there? Any memorable times? When you docked? Oh, I'm in Australia or Hong Kong or anything like that. What fun ports did you get to visit?
Absolutely. Well, I'm actually talking to you from Barbados in the Caribbean.
Nice.
And my love comes from my 3 months on board HMS Fife, a guided missile destroyer. And we were sent to the Caribbean for 3 months. And we never expected to get the hurricane that we did. And it was Hurricane David. It was 180 knot winds, and it pretty well destroyed most of the housing on Dominica. There were 80,000 homeless. And we went there and we managed to get alongside, even though the only tug was about 100 yards up inland. It had been blown right the way up. And the Prime Minister and his cabinet ran the island from our operations room on board. We as crew were told not to drink any of the ship's water. The steam boilers provided water, and that was all taken up to the hospital in Dominica.
Wow.
We were told, and we didn't mind one bit, the only thing you can drink for the next 3 weeks is beer.
Oh, that made it so fun. That's awesome, man. And you said you were in the service for 5 years. Now, in the American Navy, when they pass the equator for the first time, it's like a huge deal. They have like a ceremony, and they go from I can't remember the exact terms. It was like polywog to something else. Is that a big deal in the British Navy, or is that?
Yeah, it's I think I forget now because it was 40 years ago. But whether it was the tropic of Cancer or Capricorn, or whether it was the equator, you're probably exactly right that it was the equator. And there would be a ceremony where you were hauled before the king of the ocean, and he would order you to be submerged, be probably covered in an unpleasant flour powder or something, and then dunked in a pool of water. And that was the ceremony if you had not crossed the line previously.
Nice. Good to hear they have the Navy's all over the same around the nation or the whole world, man. That's awesome. Now,
of course, the Navy have tremendous traditions going way back.
Oh, the Navy goes back to, 1600, 1700. Hell, the British Navy goes back God knows how long. You guys, they've been sailing around since, colonial times. My goodness. Talk about a history. The U.S. Navy goes back to like 1775, I think. But even the Air Force, there's still guys alive, today who were in the first Air Force, like the first time it came around. That's how new it is. So it's crazy to see traditions going back, several hundred years, in cases thousands of years in some of the British Navy. It's wild.
And one of the nice things about serving on board Britannia is that we had our own Royal Marine Band who were on board with us. And so wherever we went, they would beach retreat and we would have live music, a lot of the time. And, I realized that actually music has been such an important part of my life. And in a way, particularly with the difficulties that occur in the world, and we're obviously facing the difficulties with Russia and Ukraine at the moment, the language barriers get in the way. But the one thing that does speak to everybody in the same way is music. And music really is the only true global language.
It is music and math. I mean, that's the only thing people can understand. I mean, you go anywhere around the world, anybody can do a math problem. You go anywhere around the world, anybody can hear a song, and they can still jam to it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I came out with Mermaid this week, which is about love. It's not necessarily restricted to the Valentine's Day love between one couple. It's more about appreciating the beauty that surrounds our daily lives.
Oh, yeah.
And we're also stressed, in our daily lives. We don't observe the wonderful blue skies and the shape of the clouds or the sound of the ocean. The spring is in the air, the beautiful first flowers that are now, appearing. In England, this week we get snowdrops, and then shortly it's daffodils. And it's very important. So in writing this song, I hope it will encourage people to look for beauty and to appreciate beauty in their lives. And particularly if they're in a mature relationship, where maybe the romance is not quite what it used to be. Somebody wrote, I read it last week, that marriage is not about perfection. It's likened to a tree that once upon a time is perfect and then becomes a little bit old and gnarled. And it's all the little negatives with the positives that make it unique and make it so special. So everybody, hang on in there.
Heck yeah. Now describe your ties to you were on a bunch of royal ships and you talk about the royal family. Describe any times with British elites. Like, have you ever met like the Queen or back in the day Princess Diana or something like that?
We on board we would give them great respect, and when they were not on board, we would exercise every day by running round the upper deck all the way round. Now, Britannia was the biggest private yacht in the world at that time.
Nice.
It was 416 feet, and that was fabulous for keeping fit. The moment that they were on board, we couldn't go aft of the halfway point, and suddenly my waistline, whoop, went up. Delicious food all the time and nowhere to exercise.
Nice. Now, did you ever get to meet, in your duties, did you ever get to meet any of the famous people, or did you kind of see them in passing? I mean, I know like when I was in the service and like the president would come by or something, depending on your duty, you might get to, witness them or something like that. We were going to get to talk to them as much. Any chance to, hey, what's up, Prince Charles, or anything like that at all? Who would you say is the most high up person in the royal family you got to, say hi to or interact with?
Well, without doubt, it was Her Majesty the Queen. And what a wonderful, wonderful person she is, and a real example to everybody, to work hard. And she has achieved greatness. And I'm only sad to read 1 hour ago that she's actually been diagnosed positively with COVID. Ooh. So we pray for her particularly today.
Definitely. Now it says after you got out of the service, you ran a property, forestry, and investment business. Now, what did that entail? Was that like environmental stuff or rehabbing classic homes, or what did you do for, the time you got out of the service till, you started singing music?
Well, I was enjoying myself in the Navy, and I was fortunate enough to inherit an estate in Oxfordshire, about half an hour out of Oxford, at Kingston Nile, and it was not being well run, and their answer was to sell off 2 cottages each year to help pay for it. And I thought, well, actually, if I stay on in the Navy, there'll be nothing to come home to. So with that, I came out at my break point. I went to the Royal Agricultural College at Cirencester and trained as a chartered surveyor on the land agent's course, and learnt about all things property so that I could then properly run the estate, which I basically rebuilt up. And that was all absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed that. But what I say to people is, what you love in your 20s and 30s is not necessarily what you love in your 50s. And so always give yourself the chance of an exit so that you can grow and do new things and continue to grow. And for me, you know, I had a lot of property to manage, and when you're reletting the same properties for the 4th or 5th time, it gets very repetitive. I suddenly realized, actually, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing this. And with the songs all coming to me, I found that the less property stuff I had going around my head, the more I could be creative. And so I really haven't looked back since.
Nice. So what was the last, have you sold, what was the last property you touched or rehabbed or sold? Was it right before, was there a crossover? Or did you when you started singing at 38, officially, did you keep selling houses for a couple of years? Or you just kind of that was a drop dead date and I'm singing point forward, or how'd that work?
Well, how it was, and my recommendation to listeners is, for goodness sake, when you've got a big birthday, and I'm talking about, it was my 40th birthday, is organize a party. You don't have to spend very much money on it, but have something to organize and take your mind off. We went as a group of 4, family, my two children then, to the ballet. And whilst I love the ballet now, because I can't do 1/8 of what they do on stage,
Oh, yeah.
but at 40 I didn't really appreciate it, and I sat there for 2 or 3 hours. And what I became aware of is, gosh, I've now had half my life. I'm 40 years old, and whilst I have achieved some things, I feel I haven't achieved half of it. And it really made me think, it's time to start costing my energy and to value my time. And with that, I started jettisoning, which is a naval word for chucking over the side, work that wasn't really worthwhile. And I started to simplify my life. And, I never do things in a hurry, in a rush. So I started when I was 40, and I'm still going now. And so I'm simplifying it. In answer to your question, it's a slow process. And the more I shed my previous responsibilities, the more I'm open to writing songs.
Okay. Now, it's read you spent some time in Hong Kong. Now, is that correct?
No, very, very little. I was asked to go and give a concert and I took a great friend of mine, Mary Jess. She won the Chinese equivalent of X Factor.
Oh, nice.
And she has a beautiful voice. She has a really fabulous recording voice. And she was out in China at university for her middle year. And she passed this very long queue outside a theatre. And of course, she said to her friend, "What are they all queuing for?" Her friend said, "Oh, it's a singing competition." So Mary just joined the back of the queue. And of course, over the months, she went through each round to the regional rounds to the national level where she won it. She's very popular in China. And we went out there together to give a concert in Hong Kong. And we had a fabulous time.
Nice. Now, would you go back to Hong Kong now that it's not, British protectorate? What do you think about Hong Kong now? Like, what do you?
Well, I'm very sad. It was the British gave up their lease of Hong Kong under very strict conditions, and I'm afraid none of them have been adhered to. And so human rights has been smashed. And I'm sorry for all the people that bought very expensive property there because it was outside of China, to now find that they might as well not have bothered, and they might have saved themselves the 30% stamp duty that they had to pay.
Right? Jeez. All right, now talk about this global anthem for world peace you sang last November, it says, right? It says White Doves of Peace. You sang with, it says BBC Young Chorister of the Year, Alexander Allison, and with the Chelsea Pensioners. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely, Joe. This was a year ago. I was out in Barbados. I love Barbados. It's my heaven on earth. And, I used to spend 8 nights a year here. And gradually, I said I'd never do anything in a rush. Every year, it would be one more day. And I suddenly woke up and thought, hey, look, we don't live forever. And so now, I'm spending 4 months each year, which is, it's lovely to get away from the extreme cold in England and the damp and the wet. So I was out here last year, and it was COVID lockdown. I had to stay in my room for 11 days waiting for PCR test results. I was in the room with my son. We actually get on very, very well. And it was during that time that I realized the world needed to pull together. Leading nations had developed their own vaccines, but for most populations, they had no access to vaccine. And for the world to survive, it was necessary to share and to think as one globe, as opposed to individual countries and the interests that are attached to those individual countries. And I thought, well, we all have our national anthems, and very proudly so. But what we don't have is a global anthem. And so I set about writing a global anthem, and I called it White Doves of Peace. And it's really, I'll let people listen to it rather than say what it really is, all the lyrics and everything else. But I'm really calling on the world to do more talk rather than war. And it's appealing to everybody to reach for their better selves. We've all capable of choice, but if we all reach out for our better selves, that can be contagious. If we are all generous, it's contagious.
Niceness is, you got to be nice. If you're nice, everybody else is nice, and that just begets more niceness. There's no need to be
exactly mean. And I've noticed it in life with generosity. All it takes is one person to be tight and mean, and that also is, contagious. So we have a choice, and White Doves hopefully brings it home to people. I was most fortunate because I wrote it as a duet, and Alexander Allison, he'd won BBC Young Chorister of the Year. I was very blessed that he agreed to sing the treble line. We had a young choir from his school, and the icing on the cake was the Chelsea pensioners from Royal Hospital Chelsea, who all served in the army at various stages, and they have their own choir, and in their fabulous scarlet uniforms, it can be seen on YouTube. They are singing in full voice, "White Doves of Peace," and
Okay,
I think I never expected it to be as popular as it turns out to be, but it just shows if you write genuinely for yourself, it can strike home.
well, let's get. I just realized that the Chelsea pensioners. That name pensioners come from they when they're service. And someone probably got some service pensions. That's cool. I just got that.
Well, it was King Charles II who noticed, of course, France in those days were our great rivals, and I'm not sure whether it was Napoleon. I think it was probably Napoleon or the King of France that created a beautiful home for retired soldiers. And I think King Charles II felt, well, if the French can do that, we'll do it better. And so he started and built this hospital, which is one of the great institutions in London.
Stuff, man. Yeah, we got another question from Shars that will lead good into the next question here. It says, how often do you bring songs out? The Mermaid song is very touching.
Oh, thank you very much, Shah. Well, the answer is there's no pattern. Sometimes I think if I'm distracted, I'm very blessed. I've just become a grandfather.
Nice.
And
me too, actually.
yeah, and it's so beautiful because you it's not as exhausting as it is, having your own baby. You can pick up and put down at your own choice. And I've just had my grandson staying for a month. So for 1 month, I didn't really try and write a song. And so it depends on the distractions. And then suddenly I'll be in the mood. And I think it's when I'm relaxed, when I let go, and then suddenly songs will come to me. And I'm very grateful to iPhone, because iPhone has enabled me just to flick on the record button, and it's almost like being verbally sick. Out it comes. It reminds me of my father's car when I was sort of a young child, and I could smell the petrol. It was his pride and joy, and it was one of those green Aston Martins that James Bond drove around with. And my father would really be horrified when I sat in the back, and there would be no warning. It was suddenly, I would be sick all over his seats. And my writing songs, it comes to me as quickly as that. And rather like Paris, that I wrote on Valentine's Day, I think it was from start to finish, it was 25 minutes.
Nice.
And it's odd because it feels like a previous generation is sending me the information. And I can't explain it better than that. I've got way back, I think 5 times great grandfather, who was a professional musician, and he was a songwriter, and he was the first professor of music at Trinity College, Dublin. And so whether he's sending me these things, and I know that my great-grandfather could sing all the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas without looking at the music.
Nice.
So it's there. It's in the sort of family line. Because I don't feel it's me. It's very weird. And the awful thing is, when I write a song, I then think it must be somebody else's that maybe I heard 20 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And it's in the subconscious. It's an awful feeling. And Robert Amory, my music director, I'm always relieved when he said, Jamie, this is nobody else's. This is your song.
I think it's like that with jokes too. That's why I try not to listen to too many other comics. It's not nothing personal against them, but if I hear, my buddy telling 5 jokes, a time, I'm gonna subconsciously remember that joke. And what if I'm on stage or I'm on YouTube and I'm telling a joke and I rehash my buddy's joke? He's like, "Oh, you stole my joke." It's like I didn't mean to. It's just the way my memory works.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
All right, now describe this new song, the latest song, "Mermaid," and how it came to you.
Well, I have to say that at the time, I had just met a lady who turned my head, and she was extraordinarily beautiful, and every word of the song I meant, and I wrote it for her. She shall remain nameless. And unfortunately, due to circumstances, our relationship never developed. But I am a romantic, and it meant a lot to me to write that song and to express my feelings for her. And it was almost agony, having written the lyrics, having written the melody, to have to wait for the actual recording to come out. The interval was about a year because it was COVID. So I had to wait to meet Robert Amory, and we work together on the piano arrangement. Then when I've heard it and worked on it a little bit, we make slight changes. I then hand it to Robert because I realize it's way above my pay grade, and he does the wonderful orchestration. So he has an orchestra of 70 people,
Nice.
All professional musicians. And we were not allowed, even in the size of Abbey Road Studios, to record all together. So we had to do it in 4 parts. We had the choir in one chapel. We had Alexander in another chapel. And we had to do the strings one day. And then it all had to be professionally cleaned each time. And then all the brass. And finally, my voice. And then the edit, and then the master. So you can imagine. So when we this week released it, it was a great joy for me. So it means a lot.
All right, so think about that. If you're going in the music industry, post-COVID world, it's not just like you turn on a thing and show up and you talk. There's 4 different edits and deep cleanings, all kinds of crap we got to deal with now. It's ridiculous, man. That's a lot of effort. But I imagine that getting that finally all together has got to be awesome, though. That's got to be cool, man. Now, what are there any other things you'd like to accomplish in life besides singing? I mean, obviously you probably sing a couple songs. Any other things you haven't told me about? Like, I want to learn to skydive or anything random like that. You passionate about? Like to learn?
Well, I was once foolish enough to jump out of an aeroplane for charity. I think I raised £300, which probably equates to $400. And I gave myself on landing. They said, for goodness sake, don't land in the river and don't land in the trees. And I had a choice between the river, where they said there's a likelihood you could drown in your parachute. The trees, you would end up suspended. So I chose the only other thing, which was the airfield fence. and I missed it by about 1.5 feet.
Nice.
Nowadays, it wouldn't happen because they don't chuck all 6 of you out in one pass. You all tend to land in the right place. But it caused me 25 years of spinal disc issues. Absolutely. So I would discourage people from that. And but any other passion, yeah, go for it.
Nice. Now, what would we touched on this a little bit before because you're talking about, how you got into it at a later age, but what would you tell people who said that I'm too old to pursue my passion? What would you tell those people?
I think it's what holds most people back is their fear and not wanting to be different to everybody else. And so I think what I've learned is, look, paddle your own canoe. We are all individual, we are all unique, and we all have strengths and we have weaknesses. Don't be frightened of your weaknesses. Everybody has them. I think in friendships, people are invariably trying to show their strengths, their better assets. And actually, in friendship, what draws people together is showing the vulnerability.
Oh, yeah.
And so don't be frightened of following your passion. Don't think, oh, I'm going to make the most awful fool of myself. I make a fool of myself every time I go on stage. And in fact, here in Barbados, we had the most fantastic evening on Thursday night. And because of COVID restrictions, we were limited to just 50 people. But my God, I think because people have been locked down in curfew, the chance of just coming out to a live concert, nice. Everyone's saying, when are you going to do it again? And we had an amazing time. I did a show in London before I came here, and they just invited me back on the 28th of April to the Pheasantry in Chelsea on the King's Road. And that is going to be great fun. I'm looking forward to it already.
Good stuff, man. Now, is there anything else you want to promote besides the new song Mermaid, which you can get on YouTube? It's a great video if you haven't watched it. Beautiful song. Anything else you promote, and how do people get a hold of you?
Well, I tell you what goes through my mind is that with Spotify, I don't have great numbers following me. But what I notice is I have a much greater following in the USA than I do in England. And in England, I'm doing things. I'm putting on shows. I'm in the media. In America, I've never done anything musically, and yet I seem to have some interest there. And I have got a conversation tomorrow with a very experienced manager. And my question to him is, look, is it worth me coming over to do initially a small concert? I stayed at the Carlisle about 5 years ago. And of course, they've got the wonderful jazz bar in New York in the Carlisle Hotel. And something like that would be a great place to start. Beyond that, I absolutely have no idea. But part of me feels I want to explore America.
Oh,
do a few concerts.
You love them. It's weird too, because initially when I started doing this, I'm thinking, oh, my show's gonna be America. But man, I get I talk with some of the English people and the UK guys, and it's like it's so fun. It's just because you learn. I think what it is, we're learning about different cultures and stuff we don't necessarily have over here. Like us Americans can probably take a lot of civility lessons from English people. Like when I hit up English guys, UK people, they're so nice, man. They're so nice. Americans are so on edge and mean, but you guys would love the excess of America. Like you could do anything over here. Like if you got $20, you could go out to the gun range and shoot some bullets. It just takes some stress off. There's so many random things about each country. That's the most thing I love about doing stuff like this, just learning, different things that I never got to experience. I'm learning the map of England and, learning how, everything coheses over there and people get to learn about America too. So it's that Beatles phenomenon, man. I think, like when they came over here, they were nearly as popular in England. They come over here, they're still one of the most popular bands ever. It's weird how like we go over there, you come over here. It's just like, I think the countries are so similar, but so, I think we want to be like the other country more than we realize. I think eventually, we could have a union, the U.S. American or American UK union. I think it would work. I really think it would work. We're such similar people, man. Great nuances between the cultures, in my opinion.
Well, my father certainly felt so. And he emigrated when he was about 21 to America and spent several years there. And he never lost his love for America. He had a home in Florida. He spent a lot of time in LA and quite a bit of time in New York. And in a way, I feel, well, I would now start to explore the opportunity that I know maybe is there for me in the United States. So that is my project for the next 12 months. Whether anything happens, I have no idea. It would be much easier if I was 25 years old.
That's the same way.
Had a full head of hair, but
I'm the same way, brother. I'm the same way. We're baldness brothers. I'd like to thank Mr. Jamie Lonsdale for coming out. Maybe somebody will be Sir Jamie Lonsdale. We never know, but you're a great man. Honorable interview. This is fun, man. I really appreciate it, brother.
Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Okay, man. Take it easy, and we'll see you guys next week. Take it easy, guys.
Thank you.